welcome to episode 4 of Historians in Cars Getting Coffee. Same coffee, same historians as the last episode.
Also same car, really.
Same car, and basically the same road. But we thought we were on a streak, so we can try and extend it. But before we get back to Allen Packwood, director of the Churchill Archive Centre and the Question of Churchill, Warren is going to tell us an amazing fact about the McDonald's signs here in Tennessee.
Well, the amazing fact is I worked for T&T Signs from about the year 1996 through to about the year 2005, and then again until 2008. And every McDonald's sign in Tennessee, East Tennessee, now this is not true west of Nashville, because Tennessee is an irregularly shaped state, but Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, at some point or another, I was inside those McDonald's signs working on them as a sign tech and erecting those signs.
That's amazing.
Some of them are fluorescent, some of them are metal halide bulbs, a lot of them are LED now, but every one of them, the M is the correct way.
Well, that's pretty comforting as we go on our journey. And I'm gonna bring back things to the serious question of D-Day. Now, the question which I've got for Alan, which I didn't have. Well, other people were leaping in wanting to ask questions at lunch, so I couldn't ask this question, but I'm going to ask it now. So my question is. Obviously, there was a lot of struggle over the planning of D-Day. Churchill resisted various suggestions which were made by the Americans. He eventually came to agreement with them on when it should take place. But my question is, Alan, if Churchill had been able to draw up the strategy by himself, and if the strategy had then worked, how would things have panned out? How and when would the war have ended?
So no small questions then at this point. So I think Churchill always wanted the best of all worlds, basically. He certainly would have wanted to keep fighting in Italy. And now that's partly because, of course, the Italian theatre is under British command, under General Alexander, so it's about winning laurels and having a campaign where he has more direct influence over the military there, I think. But it's also partly thinking about the post-war situation and thinking about who is going to have control of the Mediterranean, who's going to have control of the Balkans, preserving the British position there. So he would have wanted the best of both worlds. He wanted to go in France, but he also wanted to keep going in Italy. Of course, at different times as the mood struck him, he also wanted to go in Norway. He also further down the Atlantic French coast.
Well, I suppose the question which I would just jump in there was he prepared to tolerate a longer war? If that maybe involved fewer casualties, or did he think that by these various actions in places other than Normandy, that might lead to some kind of sudden German collapse, or was he content to carry on with the bombing campaign and believe that German morale would collapse that way, and that therefore the victory might be bought at a sort of cheaper price?
I think by 1944 he was aware that politically he couldn't resist the American pressure anymore for going in northwestern Europe. So he accepted that. I think that there were always going to have to be landings in northwestern Europe, but he didn't think that they had to be the sole focus, and he resented the primacy of Overlord, what he would call the tyranny of Overlord. I don't think by 44 he believes that the war can be won by the bombing campaign alone. As to whether he's prepared to tolerate a longer war with fewer casualties, that's an interesting question. Certainly prior to D-Day, one of his big worries are the potential levels of sort of French civilian casualties, and the fact that might actually turn France post-war against Britain. The thing about Churchill is he's having to think about these things in a slightly different way to Eisenhower or Marshall or Montgomery. He is thinking about the post-war political situation, and I think a slightly longer war with fewer casualties is probably looking slightly better for the post-war political situation. But it's not that he is opposing Overlord per se, it's that he's opposing Overlord in isolation. But I think the other thing about Churchill, of course, is that he likes to be a prod, and he likes to fire out these ideas at the military commanders, really to sort of probe and to test them to see what might be viable.
Yeah, I mean, the other interesting, I think you make a really great point about the politics of it, that he has to think about the post-World War and the sort of geopolitical strategy as well as purely the military side. I mean, I think that's very important. I suppose, sort of the other question in my mind is how this relates to kind of the war in the Far East.
I mean, the sense I get, both from the sort of contemporary documents and, of course, from Churchill's war memoirs, is that he is sort of less concerned about the war in the Far East. I think his immediate priorities are in the Atlantic and the Mediterranean, and I think, but he is very concerned about maintaining British influence in the Mediterranean as a way of ultimately maintaining the empire.
And then I suppose the other thing which really...
Well, I would just like to interject to say we're at Crossville, and you'll see that was quite a difficult McDonald's sign because it's between two poles and a pole directly holding it up. So you have to run the wires down on one side. It was quite a complex lift.
And you said earlier that I'm sure you said you got inside these signs. I don't see how you got inside.
Well, I mean, I didn't fully get inside. I my hands and things were inside them.
And your little legs were sticking out the bottom.
Well, sometimes, yeah. They're little doors. I mean, it looks quite small from here, but they're actually quite large.
Well, I'm going to do an incredible segue where I'm going to relate putting up a McDonald's sign to the planning of D-Day.
I'm excited for that. And
basically my point is, like, Alan showed us all these documents with people going, oh my God, it might be a terrible disaster. And so, I guess my point is that historians can often really focus on, it's easy to write the history of failure in a way, because you go through all the documents, you see the arguments that everybody had, and you kind of go, oh my God, everyone was saying it was going to be a disaster, why didn't somebody do something to stop it? And so you can imagine the history of D-Day, or the history of putting up a McDonald's sign, if someone were to write such a thing, being written in that way, and that actually what is really difficult to write is the history of success. Because the history of success, it doesn't generally generate all the documentation which people create when they're saying, oh my God, it's,
if it's successful, you're just like, yay!
Yeah, it's
you
really
don't have
difficult.
all the explanation.
And also it's like
it's
basically
difficult to prove that if you hadn't done it in a different way, it wouldn't be equally successful.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so, to chuck in final analogy, hopefully we're going to get back to Knoxville all safe and sound, and nobody's going to ever ask, why that happened. It's all down to Warren here. But if we crashed, then the insurance company would generate a whole, the police would come, they'd write a report, and then we could investigate. We'd have a whole account of that failure, whereas our success, except for the fact that we're podcasting this as we speak, would otherwise go totally unrecorded.
This is a legitimate thing in intelligence studies, right? Because if an intelligence operation works correctly, you don't know about it.
Right.
So we only know about the failures, really, which kind of creates a kind of bias when you're looking back at intelligence about what works and what doesn't, because it's very difficult to know the things that work because we don't have any kind of documentation on them. Now, after so many years, of course, we do. But in a sense, anything that's contemporary, it almost makes it impossible.
Right. And, on that note, I'm going to conclude the episode because we've just made a historiographical advance and I want to capture it now.
As long as we reach Knoxville.
As long as we reach
otherwise, somebody can pluck this out of the wreckage and put it on YouTube later.
And claim it as their own.
Yeah. Okay. See you later, guys.